I am a big fan of the Castlevania series. I think that is somewhat well known. For those of you who are interested in such a thing, I have done a number of videos on the subject of games in the Castlevania series. I will be putting up an annotation for the benefit of those who want to check them out. But despite my love of Castlevania and also the Game Boy Advance, I haven't really put any time into checking out the games on that handheld from the Castlevania series. That might come as a surprise to some of you, as many of the games that came out on handhelds in the Castlevania series followed the style of what I consider to be one of the greatest games of all time, that being Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This time around, I'd like to take a look at the second of the three Game Boy Advance Castlevania titles, Harmony of Dissonance. Harmony of Dissonance takes place 50 years after Dracula's defeat at the hands of Simon Belmont. You play as his grandson Just, who is also a descendant of Sypha Belnades, making him formidable with both weapons and magic. Eager to prove himself as an equal to Just, his friend Maxim sets out on an expedition. Maxim returns and his memory is kind of hazy, and also their mutual friend since childhood, Lydie, has gone missing. It's not really explained how or why, but Dracula's castle is present, and that is the first place that Just and Maxim choose to go looking for their friend. At the risk of spoiling some of the plot, it seems that jealousy of his friend who had inherited the vampire killer whip had driven Maxim to duplicate the feats of Simon Belmont and resurrect Dracula. Yeah, the game actually refers to Simon's quest. That kinda caught me off guard. But what really catches people off guard when they play this game is the visuals. If you play this game on anything other than an original Game Boy Advance, you are going to notice just how bright and colorful everything is. This really surprised me the first time I tried the game out. But take into consideration that the original GBA models were not backlit, and if the game was too dark like the previous GBA Castlevania Circle of the Moon, it would look even more dark and muddy on that screen, making it practically unplayable. This is also why some of the early releases on that handheld like Duke Nukem 3D have a really washed out kind of look. But instead of that, Konami went with what I'd like to call a Technicolor version of Castlevania. As strange as all the bright outlines on the different sprites and the wild schemes of some of the background designs seem to be, I really grew to like them. Just's sprite is a little bit bigger than Nathan's in Circle of the Moon, or Soma's in Area of Sorrow, which I quite like, and there are a ton of amazing detail in these backgrounds. Some areas of this game also have some really wonderful parallax scrolling, and I think with a darker color scheme, so much of the art design would have gone unnoticed. This, like most of the other Castlevania titles on Nintendo handhelds, were produced by Koji Igarashi, who was assistant director on Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It shouldn't surprise you at all that this game follows the style and gameplay of Symphony pretty closely. Perhaps a little too close at times, but as far as I'm concerned, Symphony is a masterpiece, so it's not the worst thing in the world to want to copy it. Hey, go with what works. And the formula definitely still works here. The exploration, the role-playing elements, the things you'd expect from the so-called Metroid-vania games does not feel at all stale here. Although they did add a weird collecting element in which Just collects various pieces of furniture and other items in order to decorate a room in Dracula's castle. It's an element that feels really out of place, and seeing how cluttered his room gets, it's obvious that Just knows nothing about feng shui. And speaking of things that are cluttered, or in this case not being cluttered, there are a few rooms in the castle which aren't populated by monsters. In fact, they're completely barren of anything, which feels rather strange, especially since some of these are fairly large rooms. Did they forget to program in some monsters? I don't know, it does seem very odd. I've heard other people say that this game was rushed. I don't know if that's true or not, but things like this do make me wonder. Another thing that people have often commented on is the quality of the music, and I will agree that the music is not quite as good as other entries in the series, but I still like the soundtrack to this game. It has this very 16-bit throwback kind of sound to it. One surprising thing is that unlike many of the other Castlevania titles, they did not include any of the classic themes. I always liked it when the other games in the series would do this, so I find this somewhat disappointing. but I do feel that what Michiru Yamane made for this game is not at all bad. In closing, even with the shortcomings this game has, I still find it very enjoyable. The implementation of magic and items enhancing the sub-weapon attacks is really neat. You can find this game as a standalone cartridge for the GBA and in a double pack with Circle of the Moon. Circle of the Moon, I must say, I found rather underwhelming. And as for the third game of the Game Boy Advance trilogy, let's call it Aria of Sorrow, I know a lot of people absolutely love that one. I have yet to really spend time with it, but if it's anything as good as this, I'm sure I'm gonna love it. Anyway, if you have not played Harmony of Dissonance and you like Symphony of Night in that style, definitely give it a shot. Hope you've enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.